Greetings, fam. I was praying about what to talk to you about next, and I realized that many people are in the dark about aspects of Black history that have not been revealed, things that have either been pushed under the rug or hidden. Of course, we all know about Dr. Martin Luther King, but it's so amazing how years later they managed to pull up some dirt on him. And so now we know even more than we actually need to know. And then we have this new administration, and there's a lot of issues going on there that would take us away from our history, and especially with the advent of Black History Month. I personally feel like there shouldn't just be a month. Black history should be, a no-brainer. So I wanted to give you some things that were, for the most part, not well known in Black history. You probably didn't learn these things in school, and you probably are going to be surprised at a lot of them. And then there'll be some of you who have knowledge of some of these things, but not all of them. And then there will be the occasional few that have knowledge of everything that I'm about to tell you. So I want to start off with Maggie Lena Walker. In 1903, Miss Walker founded a penny savings bank for the Order of St. Luke, and she served as president. Its goal was to encourage savings and facilitate loans to community members. By 1920, the bank had helped about 600 families purchase homes. Eventually, the penny savings banks absorbed all other Black-owned banks in Richmond and changed its name to Consolidated Bank and Trust Company, and that was in 1929. Then Walker became chairman of the board. Now, what's interesting to note is that Miss Walker, not only was she the first African-American bank president, but she was also the first woman to hold such a position. So, combined with those two facts, this is very noteworthy. And I was surprised because here I am, almost 63. I'll be 63 this year. And I did not know this. I was never taught about it. I never heard about it. No one ever mentioned it. So I was very surprised. A lot of us know Sister Harriet Tubman, who I even have books on her because I read them frequently because her story is so amazing, how she was able to free so many slaves. And one of my favorite quotes by her is, "I could have freed so many more if only they knew they were slaves. If only they knew they were slaves." And that's Miss Tubman in her later years, in a wonderful, beautiful, magnificent photograph. Many of you know of the singer-actress Eartha Kitt, but how many of you know that she was the product of a rape? She was born on a cotton plantation. She spoke 5 languages, and she sang in 7 languages. She recorded the hit song Santa Baby in July of 1953. This little girl was the richest Black girl in the world, and it's a shame that barely any of us knew her name. Now, Sarah Rector, by the age of 10, she became the richest Black child in America. She received a land grant from the Creek Nation as part of reparations. Soon after, oil was discovered on her property. By 1912, the revenue from this oil was $371,000 per year, which is roughly $6.5 million today. Remember, this is in the early 1900s. So despite various attempts to steal her land and her fortune, Sarah resisted. She went on to attend Tuskegee University and eventually settled in Kansas City, Missouri, where her mansion still stands. Some of you older folks might recall these young ladies. They were the Fultz Quadruplets, and they were the first surviving identical African-American quadruplets. Now, the interesting thing about them is that when they were born, there was a big fuss made about them, and the company who makes the pet milk company, it was actually a few of the companies that approached them. Carnation approached the family and what happened is the deal went to pet milk. And these girls were featured in tons of advertisements. It said that the doctor who delivered them was their manager, and their mother apparently could not read or write, and the father was a sharecropper. So they pretty much made lots of money. As a matter of fact, it was said that the year that they first were advertised by this company was the most profitable year of the company ever. However, the girls did not get their fair share of the profits because during this time again, these young ladies, I believe they were born in the 40s, and it was a different time. And especially if you could not read or write, you certainly couldn't sign a contract. You could sign it, but you sure couldn't read it. So, this was just how things were back then for black people, especially if you were not educated. Another instance of exploitation is in the case of twins, is these two brothers. They were exploited for years as they toured the country in sideshows. Their pale skin and their long dreadlocks, they were albino brothers, by the way, inspired circus promoters to give them racially tinged names, such as the Ecuadorian Savages, Sheep-Headed Cannibals, Ambassadors from Mars, and the Wild Boys from Borneo. Now, the interesting thing about this is there's two versions of the story. One said that they were actually kidnapped and taken into the circus. And then the other version is that they were sold. So choose one. But the brothers rarely talked about that life. In 1971, George passed away due to unknown circumstances. And then Willie died in 2001, and he lived to be 108 years old. But he very rarely talked about that time in his life because he said that he was just sick of it, and he was sick of people looking at him and asking him questions. And I could imagine what a horrible way to grow up, being in a sideshow when this is not something that you chose, and thus was the case. How many of you know the story of Uncle Ben's, the rice, which is still quite popular today? Well, the name Uncle Ben referred to a white Gulf Coast rice farmer. Surprise, surprise. And he was known only by Ben, and he delivered to food buyers a high-quality rice in the 1940s. Now, the man on the packages in the box was a maitre d' at a hotel, at an unknown Chicago restaurant in the mid-50s named Frank Brown. And the German-born scientist, Erich Husenlob, is the one who allegedly chose Ben's rice as the starting point for his revolutionary rice company. It is believed that the only reason Uncle Ben was called Uncle instead of Mr. Ben is because white people at the time, did not want to address blacks as Sir or Mr. And therefore, out of respect for his age, he was called Uncle. So this brother, he was working at a restaurant. This man who finally made the product, and he was looking for a name for the product and also an image to associate with the brand. And he saw this black man working, and obviously he was in a suit and tie. He was the maitre d' at a restaurant at a hotel, and he put him on the box. So that's the story of Uncle Ben. Uncle Ben was never black, and he still isn't. And it's just an image. It's marketing. But I have to tell you, of the rice out there, I don't do starch too much now in my old age, but when I did, I always bought Uncle Ben's. It was a good rice, from what I recall. In fact, I preferred it over Carolina and quite a few of those other rice. I believe it was the long grain that got me. So this is not a promotion, by the way, because I don't know what it tastes like now, but this was back in the day when I used to live on rice. Okay, Richard Allen. He was born a slave in February 14th of 1764, and he was an African American clergyman and founder of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So those of you who attend these AME churches, please know, you probably do know, but for those of you who don't know, this was the man who founded it. He was the first pastor of a black group that withdrew from the Methodist Episcopal Church. And when the AME church was organized, Richard Allen was then consecrated as its bishop. There's a term that's going around quite a bit for the last couple of years, Black Wall Street. But many people do not know that there actually was a place. And on June 1st, 1921, this photo shows you the scene in the Greenwood district where the wealthiest African American community that ever was, and still to this date, in the United States, was completely destroyed during the Tulsa race riot. Now, Black Wall Street was a modern, majestic, sophisticated, and unapologetically black community. Tragically, it was also the site of one of the bloodiest and most horrendous race riots and acts of terrorism that the United States have ever experienced. I think it left 300 people dead and more than 9,000 homeless. It was attacked, looted, and literally burned to the ground. And it said that this was strictly jealousy. This was in the early 1900s, and the whites of that town were very upset that blacks were prospering, and so it was pure jealousy. And it's a shame, but it is what it is, and it's almost 100 years later, and not quite, but almost. And many people, especially black people, don't even know that this place existed. Then we have this, which is always amusing to me whenever I pay my Con Edison bill. I pay it online, and I always wish they had a comment box so I could remind them that Edison didn't create the bulb. But since they don't have a comment box, I can never tell them how I feel. Thomas Edison did not invent the light bulb. The inventor, Lewis Latimer, of the filament, should be actually credited for what we now have as the light bulb. Because without the filament, the bulb couldn't work. So, from reading Latimer's story a couple of years ago, I did read his story because it intrigued me. And I understand that he was credited with several patents. He was a smart man. And again, I'm stressing education. And it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to go to college, but you, at the very least, should know how to read and know how to write. And if you're going to go into business, you should learn how to handle your business. And so this brother Latimer, he knew how to handle his business. He applied for several copyrights, and he owned his inventions, unlike other people. But somehow Edison still was able to take credit for the light bulb, and to this day, our light bill is paid through Con Edison, at least here in New York. Some of you might have other lighting companies. I understand that now there are actually quite a few other electric companies. But here in New York, we pay ours to Con Edison. And actually, how fitting is that? Because he probably conned Latimer out of obtaining the copyright for the whole creation. And so he slapped his name on it. So yeah, Con Edison. That fits. Now I get it. All right, so what does the word have to say? So many of you youngins think you have created something new. You think that these trends and all this stuff you're doing is new and that it's never been done before. Well, guess what? Ecclesiastes 1, 9 through 10 says, all things continue the way they have been since the beginning. What has happened will happen again. There is nothing new here on earth. Someone might say, look, this is new. But really, it has always been here. It was here before we were. And that brings me to the second part of the video, whereas I want to show you some things that some people think are new, but they're actually things that have been done before. Starting with tennis. Now, this is a 117-year gap. In the first photo, portrait A, is of Julia Richardson. She was a tennis player in 1898. She won 6 doubles titles during her career. To the right, portrait B is Serena Williams, also a tennis player, 2015, and to the present, I believe she still plays. But she won 13 Grand Slam doubles titles during her career and more. Now, the interesting thing about this is the sister to the left is sitting in a crown, and she's very regal, and she's dressed very modestly. As I would imagine a queen would want to appear publicly, very modestly dressed. Yet, 117 years later, we have this queen of tennis, Serena, with her legs gapped open and in her spiky heels, in her sexy outfit, sitting on a throne. So, I'm not sure if Serena saw the picture of Julia Richardson and decided to do her own version. But it's nothing new. That's my point with that. I have more that I could say, but I won't because I want to keep going. Okay, brothers, there's so many of you out there that want to be gangsters. Well, here's a real gangster. This is Robert Smalls. Now, Brother Smalls, he was born into slavery. Okay, this also should show you and tell you that nothing can stop you if you're determined to reach your goal. He stole a Confederate military ship in 1862. So he was born in slavery in 1839. And then he stole this military ship in 1862. He disguised himself as the captain. He outwitted and got past these Confederate guard ships by using their secret codes and hand signs. He rescued slaves and their families, escaped to freedom, ran for Congress, and he won. So, if you heard that noise, I was so excited. I started banging on my table for emphasis, and it caused some of my stuff to fall down. So that's the noise you heard. Because some of you will give me messages about everything except the video. So I find that if I talk too much, it's because I have to stop and explain every little thing. Not all of you, most of you are great. And even the ones who have to pick out and nitpick. I don't know how many times I've been told that it was not, it was Jet Li in the Aaliyah movie and not Jackie Chan. Okay, I made a mistake. Get over it. Moving on. Another thing some of you youngins think you started was the selfie. Now, I'm not sure if I got the sister's name right, but the picture is obviously her in a mirror with a camera taking her selfie. So selfies are not new, folks. This sister was doing it and from the attire that she has on, I would guess this was probably maybe the 40s or the 50s, maybe even the 60s. That camera looks old as heck. So, who knows? But you didn't start it. Another thing that you youngins want to take credit for is twerking. And as you can see here, this is around the early 1900s based on the cars in the background. We have black people twerking in the street. They're twerking, and And this is not something new. So you think it's new. And actually, I'm African. I can tell you that there are dances in Africa that look very similar to twerking. And so, twerking is not new. For those of you, if you didn't have a clue, well, now you know. Okay, the other thing is the Afro. Now, many of you do know that the Afro is not new. It was actually popular in the 60s and the 70s, and this was thanks to Brother James Brown, who said, "Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud," and people began to embrace our blackness. But a lot of you don't know about this guy, Nate. He was called the Bush Doctor, and he opened his first hair shop in 1963 at the age of 23. And he called it he called it Nat's Hair Care Clinic. And it was originally nicknamed the Hair Doctor, but once the Afro made its debut, he focused on treating the fro. And not just styling it, he focused on the care and the growth and so forth. And so he became known as the Bush Doctor. You go, Nat. That's a great thing. He was probably one of the first hair care specialists. The weave. A lot of you think that the weave is just from recent years. No. This sister, Krista Mae Thomas, was born Christmas Day in 1920. And they're conflicting the dates regarding her day of birth, but it was around the 20s, the 1920s. She was born in Louisiana, and the details of her early life are not really known. But what is known is that she graduated from Leland College near Baton Rouge with a degree in science in 1943. Jenkins started work at a wig manufacturer in Chicago, and in 1949 she began working on a technique to make a more secure fitting wig. She then moved to Malvern, Ohio, and began studying how sewing in commercial hair with a person's natural hair could add length and body. And in 1951, Jenkins filed a patent for her hair weave technique, and that was granted in 1952. Jenkins owned and operated her Christina's Hair Weave Penthouse Salon in the Shaker Heights section of Cleveland until 1993. She also taught her hair weaving techniques at hair shows across Europe, and she later was married to jazz pianist Herman Duke Jenkins, and they raised one daughter together, Miss Sheila Jenkins Cochran. And so she was born Thomas, but she became Jenkins after she got married. So how about that? So many of you think that these things are new, and I can even tell you something just off the record. It doesn't pertain to African Americans, but it does pertain to hair. A lot of people think that all these lace fronts and full lace wigs are new. But no, they had those things way back. I remember seeing a sister wearing one way back. It must have been it was around the time my daughter was born, so it had to be around 1970 something, maybe 78, 79. And the reason I could tell is because back then the lace fronts, they were made by costume designers, people in theater, because they were used for shows. Like if you had someone who had to play a lion, if you remember that, the Wizard of Oz, they had wigs that they made to look like a lion's mane, and they would attach it to the person. And so this sister was wearing one, and I forgot, because it was so long ago, where she told me she had gotten it, but it was indeed a lace front wig. And so those, they've been with us a while. That's a long time ago. Okay, so what has happened, people? 5 types of minds after slavery currently exists. And that's the revolutionary. There is also the misguided. Then there's the self-hating. And then there is the ignorant to the culture and its struggles. And then there is lastly the whatever's convenient. I strongly urge you brothers and sisters. If you fit into any of these particular categories, there's a few more that I could think of, but these are the main ones. You need to work on you. Because yes, there's good things in some of these. In the revolutionary, you want to fight for change, you want to see change happen. That is all well and good. But we also have to be mindful that it's not a we against them scenario. Because right now, black people, we are responsible for we. We can't blame anybody else in this day and age. In this current 21st century, it is we who have to answer for ourselves. So the revolution has to begin within, in revolutionizing your thoughts and your actions, and then you can move on. Those of you who are misguided, unfortunately, the misguided rarely know that they're misguided. They think, and the Bible speaks of this too, they think that what they are doing is right in their own eyes. So that's the hardest group to reach, but it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Also, the self-hating, whatever it is, however long ago it was, that whatever happened put you in that frame of mind, it's time to let it go. Some people go to their grave hating themselves. And the self-hating is actually how certain trends became popular. Wasn't always the reason, but these current trends that we have with the skin lightening and the fake hair, like I said, not everybody wears fake hair because they hate themselves, but there are a lot of people who do, and you can't deny it. They hate their kinky hair and they don't want to see it, so they cover it with the hair that they want. And now we live in a time when you can pretty much be whatever you want to be. There's plastic surgeries, all these things are a direct result, in most cases, of self-hate. So you have to work on that. That again begins from within. Those who are ignorant to the culture and the struggles, I mentioned this in another video, there are many blacks who haven't struggled and who grew up in a different environment other than a black community. And so they don't sympathize, nor do they emphasize with the struggle. And because of that, they're far removed from it. They don't feel like they need to participate or delegate or, do anything for the furtherance and the betterment of black society, because they actually do not feel that they belong to it, although they are black. And lastly, you have these whatever's convenient, people that just want to live their life, and if they're okay and their family's okay, well, that's pretty much all they care about. So people, step it up. And then I want to just close with saying, blacks were the first blondes way before Clairol. I'm talking about naturally blonde. And this is just a small segment of black people who are around the world in different areas of the globe. And they are black-skinned people, but they may not necessarily be African. A lot of them are from different tribes, Aboriginal tribes. You've got some from the Maltese Islands. You've got a lot of them from different places, but they still have the black skin color, and they were born with naturally blonde hair. So do not assume the next time you see a black person with blonde hair that they dyed it, because in a lot of cases, nope, we're born that way. Okay, so I'm going to wind it up now. There's a little more I'm going to show you after the prayer, but I'm not going to talk because I usually like the prayer to be the last thing that I say. So, but stay tuned, because I want you to just see the message at the end that I thought was very appropriate for this video. So it's just another slide, a short one. But Lord, a lot of us are ignorant of who we are, where we came from, how we should proceed, what we should teach our children. There's just a lot of ignorance in terms of people not knowing the culture. And I believe, Lord, that if we don't know where we came from, we can't know where we're going. I think, Lord, and I ask you to please keep me clear on this, because I want to go out and speak with the youth, but I want to speak with knowledge. So, Lord, help me to understand that the reasoning behind so many young people in their choices that they're making these days, in their choices of being on the internet to find sex instead of focusing on their skills and using the internet to gain knowledge and to further their education. Help me to understand the young people who invest their entire day in playing video games instead of maybe learning how to create a video game and make it marketable and become successful at that, instead of being in a fantasy where once the game is over, so is that fantasy life. Help me to understand the young people and how and why they choose the gang lifestyle, Lord, as opposed to being independent and following their own mind and being real gangsters by making change and helping and uplifting people and oh Lord, there's just so much lacking still in our people. As a black woman, Lord, I ask you to help me to understand, what do I need to do to change the course of the youth, in particular, the black youth. I'm very, very, very concerned. So, Lord, I ask your guidance in these things. I ask you to bless the listener, bless those who are blessed by the video. And I thank you. I thank you.